Hey there, it's Vashti Sarah. Welcome back to Post Blog. If this is your first time listening, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like button, follow button, share button, all the buttons to stay connected with the Post Blog podcast. And for those of you who this is not your first time, welcome back. Hey guys, so today I have some special guests. They are Drew and Gretchen Blomstrom. I hope I pronounced that right. I do butcher people's last names all the time, so feel free to go ahead and correct me. But today they're going to share their hearts. They're going to share what the Lord has placed on their hearts. And that is living life intentionally in a ministry mindset, that is. And I just want y'all to just sit back, relax, and glean from their wisdom. And hopefully you guys walk away with something that you can implement either this week, or maybe it's a nugget that you can just tuck away that the Lord will bring to remembrance whenever you need it. So Drew and Gretchen, I thank y'all so much for saying yes and for being willing to share your heart. So why don't you guys just go ahead and share a little bit about yourself, about your family, what you do, who you are, because I want people to know you guys. You guys are pretty amazing. You guys have impacted my life when I attended Crosspoint Church with y'all, but I do follow y'all on social media and I see what the Lord has been doing and the crazy steps that y'all have been making in ministry and in following what the Lord has called you to do. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you so much, Vashti, for having us. And you did get our last name correct.
Yeah, you got it right.
Good job. Most people don't get it right. So I'll just share a little bit about ourselves. So I'm Gretchen and
I'm Drew.
Okay. We have 2 children and then we have one on the way. So we have a daughter who is 4 and then a little boy he just turned 3.
And he'll let you know.
Yes. And then we're expecting another one in April. So we'll see, boy or girl. It's a surprise.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, we're excited. So recently our life has been a lot of change.
A lot.
Yes, a lot of change. So, God ended up just like we weren't looking for a house. We just happened to we're really into like growing our own food, whether that be like vegetables or meat or whatever that is. So homesteading, that's generally what it's referred to.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, we were coming to look at some bees at like a property that we were going to buy bees from this guy. And he was like, oh, hey, my house is for sale. Do you want to buy it?
He's just joking.
Yeah. Well, we're like, this is random. We weren't looking for a house. We actually really like our house. But we were like, sure, we'll look at it. And we ended up putting an offer on the house and did not get it. So they accepted another offer. Well, like 3 months later, that offer fell through.
It was 102 days. I went back and looked. It was 102 days from the day that our offer got declined, and our real estate agent called us and and she said, hey, the house back on the market, are y'all interested? And we said, well, we had just kind of gotten to a place where it was like, all right, well, if that's not what the Lord has for us, then we will just continue to do what we can here on an acre. Actually, it was a little less than an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll scale back some of the dreams and ideas that we have and just be content with what we have. And that's what we began to do. And so for it to come back on the market, we were a little shocked. We were like, all right, thought that door was closed. And then here we are, it was a pretty quick transition. From the moment we put our house on the market, our house sold in like 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we were moved out of our house. That was, I think that was middle of October.
Mm-hmm.
We were moved out of our house and into this house by December 4th.
Wow. That's a lot real quick.
A whole lot real quick, especially with animals. So animals and kids and a wife that's, a little over halfway through her pregnancy and Christmas and all the things. It was a challenge.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys have started a business with that move, or was that business already implemented before that big move?
So we did sell like eggs and pasture raised chicken, and vegetables, but it wasn't like, we were like, oh, this is kind of like our hobby. We love to do it. And honey, we had bees.
It just kind of gave us, it honestly, in some ways, paid for some of the things that we just enjoyed doing. And instead of being an expense, it just kind of broke even and allowed us to provide food for our family. So.
Yeah, but when we didn't get this house, because we were like, oh, wow, we could do so much more, because this is on 6 acres. And it was, they didn't accept our offer. We were like, okay, God, like, you're shutting that door. So that was an interesting time. Like, it was hard, like harder than I thought, because we were like, okay, you know, we're going to be content where we are, because that's not where you want us to be. And then, bam, all of a sudden.
Well, and we
it changed.
You know, we had the desire to like farm at some point. It was kind of like on our 10-year goals.
Yeah.
And, that's something we try to sit down and do regularly, is dream of where God may be taking us, and try to set ourselves up to say the biggest yes to God.
Wow.
So that when he says move, we can say yes and move.
Right.
Anyways, and so we didn't realize that something that was on our 10-year goal list would soon be on our 12-month list, you know?
Wow.
And shortly after that, God was just stirring, and Gretchen and I, and just began to dream. And I prayed over our property a couple of times, and with a few friends. And I don't know, it just, to me and to Gretchen, it was just like, this is not something that we need to be selfish with. This is something we need to share.
Right.
And so we just began to talk and dream, and through a series of events that were good and bad, or negative, I should say, not necessarily bad, but God really made a shift in us and released us from where we were, which was Cross Point.
Yeah.
And to go plant a church, but the model of church planting that we feel led to plant with is, or just what we feel led to do. It's not even necessarily model, but we know that Gretchen and I are going to get to have a tent making job, very much like Paul did.
Wow.
And so this is our tent making job. This is how we are going to provide for our family. But ultimately, we also believe that it's going to create a community to help share with people, help educate, and then inspire people to either do this on their own, or to make healthier choices, not necessarily just in their food, but for their family,
right,
and in their spiritual life. Wow. And be able to ultimately use food as a bridge to share the gospel.
Wow. That's unique. That's a different target audience that I don't think I've ever heard before, which I know there's that need. I know there are different cultures, there are different target audiences, and I think that's a pretty great one to leverage on. So on that note, let's talk about living a life intentionally doing ministry. I know you guys have been doing that for years now, but my first question, I'd say, when in your life did you pivot where you saw the importance of intentionally living life, but also incorporating that ministry aspect in it?
I think for me, so our house flooded during Harvey. So I think that was 2017, 18, I'm not 17. Sure. 17. Okay. And we did not have flood insurance, and like, it was not livable. Our daughter was 5 months old, and a family who I actually had only met the wife. I have not met her husband or her daughter. They let us live in their house for 10 months.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's like a huge, sacrifice. We also had a Great Dane. So we also had a giant dog that came along with us.
Yeah.
They allowed the dog to live in their house too.
Not to mention a 3-month-old, 4-month-old baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And Doria. So anyways, that was like a huge blessing. And then I think losing all of our like personal belongings, like put it in perspective of, wow, this really is not mine.
Yeah.
Like, God, you're totally in control. And he did provide a way, like he totally, completely, we didn't pay anything for our house to be redone. Samaritan's Purse ended up doing it for free. And they like said the cost for it was like astronomically insane, like to fix it. So it was just really cool. Like God showed us, hey, I have you, I'm taking care of you. And then that really, like, I think for me, I don't know, is that I know it shifted Drew, but
yeah,
that was just like a wow, like God, you are totally, you know, we're just stewarding the things you're giving us. So it made us more open-handed too. Like, oh, we want to let people in need like live with us, or
yeah,
like we want to open our homes.
Pretty much from the moment that we got back in our house, we had someone living with us almost every month.
Yeah.
And up until I think up until we moved. And so that's just something that God put on our heart. But I will say this, I walked into our house, no sheetrock, everything was, bare bones. And this was where the shift was for me. And I shared this with Gretchen. I was just in a very frustrated space, as a man, as a husband, as a father. I was like, I can't fix this. There's nothing I can do. I'm legitimately helpless. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
We tried looking at a few different options and they just weren't viable. And so I was like, anyway, and I walked into our house, bare bones, mind you. I just felt like God said, your home will be a place of refuge for many. And I just said to myself, I was like, how's that even possible? Because look at this place.
Right.
But what and people say this cliche all the time, that home is where your heart is. But genuinely, I believe that it wasn't necessarily that specific home, because now if that was that specific home, then this wouldn't be that place. But God has really confirmed that even here, that this will be a place of refuge for many. And we've already seen that when people come out here, they're like, it's peaceful and it's, it's just very, like, I feel like it's very restful out here. And we feel the same way, about the space out here. But that's where God began to really shift my heart. And I was actually in a journey through Acts, and there were things that I was encountering about God and about his church and all of that, that just weren't connecting, and they weren't aligning with how I was raised. They weren't aligning with how I had really functioned. And even some of the ministry that I was personally leading, and I was deeply convicted, and things began to shift, not just in my personal life, but in my ministry that I was doing full time at Crosspoint.
Right.
And God began to really shift, like, full-time ministry isn't on staff at a church. That's called vocational ministry.
Yeah.
Full-time ministry is when you give your life to Jesus.
Wow.
And you say, I want to follow you. And he says, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
That is the moment that full-time ministry begins. It's not the moment that you say, I want to serve within the church on a Sunday morning. It's not when you accept a full-time position or a part-time position at a church. Because let's be real, part-time positions on staff at a church are not part-time. They're full-time.
Yep.
But I think that was the biggest shift for me, is going, I'm not in, I've always been in full-time ministry. I just never knew it.
Wow.
And I believe that is the shift that God is wanting to, I believe I'm seeing it really in this generation. People say Gen Z is walking away from God. I don't think they're walking away from God. I think they're just trying to seek him in more genuine ways.
Wow.
And in that they're experiencing things like Unitarianism, and they're looking at creation in a really different way. And they're and they're finding themselves in these pockets of just, let's just be real, just really odd places, like praying with crystals and saging things. It just, there are these pockets of the world that feel very comfortable, that people can connect to, but it's not God.
Right.
And so I believe that we see a lot of young people trying to find God in these places, because what they're being offered right now is not something they desire to be a part of. And so I believe that this next generation of church planters, I would say, I mean, we've really seen a rise. I mean, even with Francis Chan in California, you really seen this rise of house church model moving, and it's not based on the real estate. It's not based on the service times. It's really based on relational equity and discipleship making. Like, those are the two biggest things. And is that everything that the church is? No, but that's how the church is going to grow.
Absolutely.
Is through faithful relationship building and discipleship making. And so those are the two things that we're really focused on, but not neglecting the sacraments. So not neglecting taking communion with one another and worshiping with one another and praying and and digging into the Word of God and not just doing that with other people, but being really intentional, even with our current 4-year-old, soon to be 5, and our 3-year-old. We just talked this morning about, hey, let's, instead of just reading the Bible at night, let's actually bring the kids' Bible to breakfast, and let's spend this hour that we're at the table, and let's do a Bible study with our kids.
Wow.
So for me, it's living a life of intentionality.
Yep.
I believe, and it's saying, here are the things that I want, but if the things that I want are not conducive to what God wants to do, then I need to release what I want to do and adhere to what God desires, which, let's just be real, I would have loved to keep a comfortable job to kind of slowly take steps into what we're doing now. But God said, move on. And so here we are. Yeah.
So for listeners who desire that, like this, and you're right, this generation, we are seeking, we are, which I don't know if I'm necessarily part of this generation, but either way, I do know a lot of people, at least in our young adults youth ministry, and even in our middle school ministry, they are seeking and they want truth and they want genuine truth. They don't want that watered down Christianity where, just trust Jesus. But what does trust look like? So for those listeners out there, what does actively living intentionally and doing ministry looks like? What can they do? What's the beginning step towards that?
I think the first step is just being, so it would be spending time with God, because you have to be able to listen, like hear God's voice. So that's the most important thing, right?
Right.
Are you spending time? Are you investing in that relationship first? Because if you're not spending time with God, how can you decipher, is this from God?
You can't do the ministry of God separate from God.
Ooh.
Right, exactly. Like God's should be your first priority, right? And then just hearing his voice and listening. And some people are like, that's weird. How do I do that? I've never audibly heard God's voice or whatever.
That's cool. Me neither.
Yeah, me neither. But I think it's more about just being in tune to God's word, being open, really focusing and being intentional. Even, it's hard to do. I have 2 small children. That's not something that's easily done. I get it. But making that relationship really a priority and saying, okay, God, I want you to use me. Just like Drew was saying, it doesn't have to be, I'm volunteering at a church or working at a church. God can literally use you in your day-to-day life. And he'll bring people to you and direct you and give you opportunity to minister to other people and connect to other people.
Yeah, that's definitely the first step, I would say, is connecting with God, encountering God, because your encounters with God prepare you to encounter people. And if I'm encountering people with all of my sinful nature, then they will not see Jesus. They will see a bitter, battered, broken version of me that they will translate into Jesus, because I call myself a Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm not allowing the word to renew me that day to prepare me to encounter people with a renewed version of my sinful heart. And so, I have to make it a priority. I wake up every morning and we have, a whole farm of animals, and we have kids, and and I have men and women that we meet with on a regular basis. Like, our life is busy, but I have to intentionally wake up an hour before my house wakes up to spend time with God. That's absolutely first. But I would say there's two other things that God has made very, very clear to me, and that I see in the life of Jesus, and that is, and that one of them is this: that first, I have to take seriously that my home is the greatest area of ministry I could possibly have.
Wow.
And I believe that what we've seen shift in the evangelical church is the movement of youth ministry and kids ministry becoming this place where parents are giving the full responsibility of the spiritual development of their children to the church, and treating it more as like Jiffy Lube for their children. To, hey, I'm going to drop them off and you teach them all the things so that when they hang out with me and they're around my friends and all of that, that they act like a Christian kid. and so, but for me, this is a convicting point for me, that my children and their children will adhere more to my example than my word. So I have to be who I want my kids to be.
Yeah.
So if I want my son to love Jesus, he's got to see me loving Jesus. And that means every once in a while, my son will wake up early and he'll come and sit with me, and I will ask him, son, do you know what I'm doing? And he will say, you're spending time with God. And to me, he's 3.
Yeah.
But that's a foundational age.
Yep.
And so I don't want to give that up. But also in my marriage, that if my wife is not encountering God, or if my wife is getting my leftovers, then I'm actually not taking care of my home, which means I have no business doing ministry as a leader within his church.
Right.
So I think often we're like, oh yeah, my house is provided for financially. It's not crazy. Like, my kids are in sports and they're engaging with friends. That's good. No. Do your kids know that you love Jesus? Do your kids intentionally, do you help your kids encounter God on a daily basis? And it doesn't matter how old they are.
Yeah.
We've been singing and praying over our kids since they were babies. And that's an important thing too. So, and then the second aspect I would say is that you don't have to stop what you're doing to invite people in. So for instance, I think often we draw a boundary in between our home and our ministry, when really, if your home is the greatest area of ministry that you have, then just invite people in.
Yeah.
And that's hard. It's scary. It's vulnerable. It means you have to be transparent. It means that sometimes your house isn't going to be picked up. It means sometimes you're not going to have all the food that you want to share with your family because you have 2 extra people over at your house.
Right.
So you just ask God to bless it and everybody's full at the end of the day. It's legitimately things like that sound so simple, but it's because that's what ministry is. It's simple. Wow. And so that's all I've been practicing for a while now, is that, when people are like, hey, do you have time to meet? I'm like, well, I'm moving cows today, but if you want to come over and help me move cows, like you can have my ear, and I'll be more than glad to pray with you and walk with you and talk with you as we do this. And it's not saying my life is more important than yours, but saying,
let's do life together.
We don't have to stop what each other is doing in order to do life together. So those are the 2 things that I would say beyond that is your home is your first place, and take care of that, because if you can minister to the people in your home, sometimes those are the hardest people to love. And I think that prepares you to bring people in. But also, if you invite people into your home and your home's a mess, then they're not going to be so quick to trust you.
Wow.
So when we invite people in and our kids love them like their family, which we talk to our kids about, because we're like, hey, you can't kiss everyone. Then people, it does something to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it shifts you. in a major way. And it really just creates a bridge. We've had young men in our house who are brought to tears because they're like, your son makes me want to have kids. Your daughter makes me want to have kids. And I just can't picture that in my life. But if I do, I cannot wait to have kids, and I want them to be like that. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a compliment to me, but I also see beyond that. And I go, that's God using our family to put hope in the eyes of a man who doesn't yet see what God is doing.
Wow.
So
before we wrap it up here, amazing points, amazing insight. What would you hope, if there's one thing listeners could walk away with, what would that be?
Ooh.
I think for me, it would be that you don't have to have a title or a specific, job per se to be able to just share Jesus and encounter, like have community with people, intentionally live a life that's bringing people to Christ, like sharing Christ. You don't have to have a title or be, I have accomplished this, whatever that thing is. God can use you, and he likes to use the most broken people. So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would say that is, that's huge. But for me, it's just preparing yourself to say the biggest yes to God. And the only way I know how to prepare myself is to encounter God. So I would say, listeners, if you are not encountering God on a daily basis, it feels like a checkbox, but it's not. It's a heart check, and it's a opportunity to align yourself with God before you try to go encounter others. And that is what it is for me every day. Yeah. So I would say, put it on your calendar, make a date, encounter God, let him begin to show himself to you for who he is. And if you don't feel like you understand scripture, and you're like, every time I read it, I don't understand it. Before you read, I want to challenge you in this. So here's a challenge for everybody, is that if you don't understand it, say, God, will you allow me to see who you are, see who I am, and what you desire from me today?
Yeah.
Not 10 years from now, not next year, not in 3 months. Today, what do you desire from me? But first, who are you, and can you show me who you are?
Wow.
And if God doesn't show up and show you who he is, and you don't understand what you're reading, then stop reading. And find someone who you can read with. I will say that.
Yeah.
But I believe that God will show up, because everyone I've challenged to do that, including myself, God shows up.
Yeah.
Because he wants to meet with you. He wants to meet with me. And I'm grateful for that.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for saying yes, and for honestly all the wisdom. A lot of what you guys said, I know I need to implement. There are things that Jared and I, we don't even have children yet, but we've been praying over the names that the Lord have placed over our hearts, the ministry that will be in those kids' lives. And it, like you guys said, it doesn't have to be a title. It's just actively living out Christianity, and Christianity is loving God and loving people, and being 100% yes for Jesus. So, for those who don't have children, for those who are single, I'd say you can implement these things that Drew and Gretchen shared just by living out your life with people, that example that you're making. And what you do today will be a reflection of who you are as a parent, who you are as a husband, who you are as a wife, so Jared and I always said, let's not wait to become a better version of ourselves. Let's do it now. So yeah, thank you guys so much. For those who are listening, you guys do have the Synergos Farm. Is that how you say it? Synergos Farm. There we go. So go ahead and check them out on Instagram. You guys are in the Houston area, correct?
Yep, we're just south of Houston, about 25 minutes.
Okay, cool beans. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Vashti.
Thank you, Vashti.
No problem. See y'all. That's it for today, guys. Thank you for joining me on Post Blog. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like button, follow button, share button, all the buttons to stay connected with the Post Blog podcast. Same time, same place next week. I love y'all. But remember, God loves you most.